Hi, this is Tom Does Tech. I'm Tom, and in this video, we're going to create a GitHub OAuth integration into your Node.js application. We're going to create an Express server, and we're going to be able to get the logged in user, and we're going to do all this without Passport. So before we begin, let's have a look at the OAuth flow. So the user will click the login link. They'll then go to the GitHub user consent screen. They'll give authorization for our application to access their user. They'll get redirected back to our application with a code. The server will use the code to get a bearer token, and then the server will use the bearer token to get the user. And then the user will be redirected back to the login screen, to the application screen, back to the user interface, and they will be logged in. So first, let's head over to GitHub. And we're going to create our application in GitHub. So just go to your profile and then click on developer settings, click on OAuth applications. We're going to create a new OAuth application. So this is going to be GitHub OAuth demo. The home page is just going to be localhost port 3000 and the callback URL. So this will be our server. So we're going to have that on a different port, and that's going to be /API/auth/GitHub. Let's copy that for now, and we'll go back to our application, and we'll just paste that in there. Okay, so we'll just call this OAuth demo. Register the application. Great, so we have our client ID, so let's copy that. We'll come back over to README, paste that there. And we also need to create a client secret. So you can click on Generate New Client Secret. And you can copy that secret there. And let's come over and paste that as well. Okay, so our application is set up. Save those so we don't lose them. And so I have a server already set up. So this is using TypeScript, and it just has one file, and there's nothing in here for right now. And the UI is just a create React app application. So let's start with the user interface. And I've accidentally made this a JavaScript application, but that's okay. So we just need to provide one link here. So I'll paste that in. So we need an anchor with a href. And then we'll provide some text for this. So this will be login with GitHub. And our client ID, a GitHub redirect URL, a path. So this will be if you want to redirect the user back to the page that they were already on. So we're just going to say for now that the path is the index page. And so this path is not part of GitHub's OAuth. This is just a query string that we will pass to our server application, so our server can then handle the redirect back to the right page. Okay, so we need our client ID, which we saved here. Our redirect URL, which we also saved. And we can start this application. So if we cd into UI and yarn start. Come over to our browser, we should see this application getting started. And we have a login with GitHub. We can see that our client ID It's been populated, the redirect URL looks good, and the scope is user and email. If you want to add different scopes, you can see those in the documentation. If I look for the scope section, scopes for OAuth apps. Yeah, you can see all the different scopes here. The only one we're looking for at the moment is user and email, or user email. Okay, so let's click on this application. We get sent over to GitHub. We're going to authorize our application, and we're going to get redirected back to port 4000/API/auth/GitHub. And you can see here, this is our code. So if we come back, this is our UI finished for now. So if we come back to our application, we can start building our server application, and we're going to import Express from Express. And we're also going to import the request and response interfaces. Create a new app instance, a new instance of Express, and app.listen, and we need to listen on port 4000 because that's what we specified in our redirect URL, and we're just going to log server is listening. And let's double check that that works. To server dev, and our server is listening. Okay, so let's configure our first route, and that would be our redirect URL. So we just need this segment of that here. And we're going to have a request and a response. And then we're going to have a type of request and a type of response. So I'm also going to use Lodash to get the code from the query. I think this is going to tell us that we need to install the types, so let's do that. So Lodash install those as dev dependencies. And the reason I'm going to use, so the alternative would be to just say code equals request.query.code. But if for some reason query was undefined, we would get an error in our application and we wouldn't be handling that error. So if we use get, then code will be undefined, and we can then handle if not code, then throw new error. No code. Okay, and we also had a path on our query string. So if we get that, if we go back, we can see here that this path query string here, that's the one we're looking for. Okay, and we can also provide a default path, and we'll just keep that as /. Okay, now we have our code. We could use that to get our bearer token. So let's up here create a function called GitHub user, and this function is going to take our code. And then we're going to use this function to turn our code into a bearer token. And then we're going to use our bearer token to fetch the user. So if we also import Axios, and you can use any fetch library that you like. I like to use Axios. Okay, so we need to configure our client ID and client secret inside our server application. So I'm just like the client, I'm going to hard code these for now, but you obviously want to use environment variables for these because you're going to want different GitHub applications between your environments. And if your secret was to be exposed, you want to be able to change that quickly without having to push new changes out to your different environments. So let's grab this code, this client ID again. And you also want to be keeping this secret secure, because you don't want to be pushing this to your repositories and storing them out in the public. Okay, so let's also import query string from from query string. Sorry, you don't need to install anything with this. This is the package that comes with Node.js. And then we can create decoded from the GitHub token. And then we can get the access token. And then we can use the access token to fetch the user. So this is not a const, this is a function. It's actually an async function. Okay, so let's just call this for now. Say const user equals await, and then we're going to pass it our code. This function also needs to be async. And we're just going to do a res.redirect, and we're just going to redirect them back to path for now. So let's figure out what is going on here by creating some breakpoints. And then we're going to want to look at the user. Okay, and then I'm just going to dev and then run this in debug mode. Okay, server is listening, and I can run my debugger. I'll run this in Node. Okay, great. The debugger is not listening. Okay, so I got my debugger working finally. And if we come back over to our user interface, So if we come back over to our user interface, click Login, and because we have the debugger running and we have a couple of these breakpoints here, we can see exactly what is in these properties. So you can see here that this is our code. We're going to make a post request to this URL, which will return a new token. And we can see here this decoded token has an access token in it, and it tells us what our scope is and what type of token it is. And then we extract our access token out of that. And then we make a request with our access token to this endpoint to get /user. And this will only return what is in scope for that token, which is the user's email. It will return the user, but it won't return other properties such as their GIS and repositories and all that sort of stuff, because we haven't requested access to that sort of stuff. This response here is just going to be, and you can see here that this user is our GitHub user. Okay. So one last thing that we would want to do here is to type the response of this function. And you might say, oh, that's going to be annoying. There's a big object here. I don't want to type all that out, but I will show you an easy way to do that. So if you stringify this function, play it, I'm just going to detach the debugger for now and just run this in normal development mode. And then we will go through the process again. You can see here we've got a big stringified JSON object. And then if we come over to this website here, app.quicktype, you can generate all sorts of types. So let's put in our type here and we'll say GitHub user. And here's our interface. So if we put this interface back into our application, and then we'll say the return type of this function here is going to be a promise with the result of GitHub user. Now down here, we can see what is going to be in our GitHub user. So this is where you would look in your database and see if the user exists. And if they do, you would want to update them with their new information and then log them in. If they don't exist, you would want to register them. But because that would be making assumptions about what sort of registration flow you're using, what sort of database you're using, I'm just going to add a JSON web token with the user's payload inside the token. So I'm going to import JWT from JSON web token, and I also need to install the types for this. Let's do that. I want to assign the token. Let's have a look what this takes. Okay, so it takes a payload and a secret or private key. We can just provide a secret. So let's also up here define a secret. This is another thing that you would want to put in your environment variables. Preferably you would use a private key to sign your tokens. So let's put our GitHub user in there and we'll sign it with our secret. And then so the next thing we'll want to do is we'll want to set a cookie. So res.cookie And we'll just call this GitHub JWT. And we'll put our token inside the body there. We're going to say this is HTTP only, true. And we're going to set the domain to localhost. So there's a few other properties you can set on cookies. So in production, you would also want to do secure, which means it can only be sent over HTTPS. But this is not production, and so we're not going to do that. HTTP only is pretty self-explanatory. It means that you cannot get the cookie with JavaScript, and that makes it much more secure. And this path property here, this is a problem because it's going to redirect it back to the server, which doesn't exist. So we're going to have to put a absolute URL in here. So it's localhost port 3000 and then slash, and we can just put our path in here. We'll change that to a template string. Okay, so let's try that and see how we go. You can see there that it had redirected us back to the server, which is not what we want. And we need to start our server. So what we would be expecting to see is a cookie being set. And we can see it here, GitHub JWT. So let's go over to jwt.io and we'll take a look at the payload here. In this JWT, and we can see here we've got all my GitHub information. Just perfect, that's what we want. So the next thing we would like to do is to be able to fetch the user's profile from the user interface. So let's make an endpoint for /API/me. It's going to take a request and response. And so our cookie is going to be a request, dot cookies, and whatever we call our cookie up here. So let's actually move this into a constant called cookie name and define our So you might be asking why we're using a cookie instead of just storing this in local storage, since it is just a client rendered application. So for two reasons. One, cookies are a better development experience because you don't need to attach the cookie to every single request and send it along. When you make requests with include credentials, your cookies will be sent along automatically. And the second reason is this HTTP only flag, which makes your cookie secure, where a token stored in local storage or session storage is not secure because it's vulnerable to XSS attacks. And arguably, cookies are as well, but there's a few things on top of this that we can do to make sure that our cookies are more secure than a token that was stored in session storage or local storage. So this will be cookie name. Okay, so let's decode this cookie. So we'll do that with jwt.d. Sorry, it's jwt.verify. And we'll put our cookie in and our secret. So if this fails, if somebody tries to put a token in here that was not signed by our secret, this will throw an error. So we need to handle that error. So we would wrap this in a try catch block. And on an error, we're just going to res.send, and we're just going to send null. The user isn't logged in. But if the user is logged in and our token is valid, we're going to send the decoded token. Great. So let's come back over to our user interface. And I'm going to install Axios so we can make some requests. And I'm going to use state. Okay, it didn't import that for me, so I'm just going to go import the state from React user, and this is going to be our set user. So if we don't have a user, let's render the login button. But if we do have a user, let's just render a JSON stringified version of our user. And let's import Axios. Axios. So we're also going to use effect. So this might seem React heavy, but you don't need to use React, obviously. All I'm doing here is making a request to our server/API/me endpoint. Okay, so I'm going to make a function that goes to localhost port 4000/API/me, and I think it's with credentials is true. Okay, so we're going to make this an async function, and we're going to make it an async iffy. What have I done wrong here? I've done something wrong. Let's get rid of this for now, and then pop it back in. So we need another. What have I done? Okay, let's try this again. Okay, so the reason we want to make this an async iffy is because we cannot make the callback inside our useEffect function async, but we need this function here to be async. So we can say const user, we'll just call this USR for now, actually. And actually we need to await that dot then, and this will be response, and res.data. Okay, so we are getting an error on the server, and the reason is, okay, I'll look at the error in a second. So if we come over to our network panel and we refresh, we can see okay, there's a couple of problems here. One, we're getting a cause error, so we need to use that cause plugin that we installed before. And then the second problem is that we haven't used a cookie parser in Express. So let's fix the cause issue. So cause is cross-origin request something. Cross-origin request. Let's have a look at that. Cause. Cross-origin request sharing. So basically this says that this server will accept requests from this domain. And the reason we're getting a cause error now is because we have included the with credentials. So we need to configure cause, and I need to add the types for cause as well. And this error tells us what we need to do. So it tells us that the no access control origin header is present. So we need to set in the response that header, access control allow origin, and we need to set its value to localhost port 3000. And the easiest way to do that is with this cause plugin. So the cause origin is going to be http/localhost port 3000, and we're going to have credentials. So credentials adds a new header. Let's have a look. You can see these headers. So we can see our access control allow origin, and access control allow credentials is there because we've set credentials to true. So this error in the server here is now because we're not passing cookies. So we're going to have to install a cookie parser middleware for Express. Again, it's going to want its types. And this one is very easy to use. Just use it like that. So app.use cookie parser. So there's still a problem though, because we don't want that function, if it can't find that cookie, or it can't find cookies, to throw an error. So let's use low-dash's get again. And we're going to get the cookie name like this. Okay, so let's try this again. Come over and refresh our page, and we can see that we have our user here. So let's make this a little bit nicer. So you can see in here we have login. And I think that's the best thing that we have. So let's just, instead of stringifying this, let's just have a H1 that says welcome user.login. That was terrible. Welcome. And there we have it. That is how you create a GitHub OAuth integration into your Node.js application without using Passport. If you've liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much.